All right, everybody, welcome. I'm actually trying an experiment here. This is a new camera that I'm using. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. Let me know in the comments if you cannot. So first off, as people gather, I'd like to thank everybody who came by the Naval Air Station Oceana Air Show this past weekend. We had a fantastic time on Friday and especially on Saturday. Friday was the practice show, and then Saturday was the actual first day of the air show. Now, we had to do some audibles, as I mentioned in the community tab of the channel. So first off, on Monday, I got actually a voicemail from the guy who was providing the RV. You may remember some months ago, I gave a mock-up. I posted a mock-up of what the RV was going to look like with the channel logo. It was an Airstream Atlas, which is a very cool Class B RV. And unfortunately, it was in an accident. I had nothing to do with the accident that prevented us from using that vehicle. So we audibled to our backup team vehicle, which is a Toyota 4Runner. And I also put some photos of that in the community tab. So that worked great. So that was Monday. On Tuesday, my wife broke her wrist. So she slipped on a puddle of water in the garage and landed on her wrist and broke it pretty bad. We spent a lot of time in the emergency room here in Annapolis that evening. The x-rays showed that she had severely broken it. And so as a function of that, she had a splint, and we had to do a follow-up appointment at Walter Reed that's about an hour away from my house. And we were hoping that she wouldn't need surgery, but in fact, she did need surgery. So her surgery was, what is today? Wednesday. Her surgery was Monday. So that meant that we couldn't do the air show on Sunday because we had to get back and prep for her early morning surgery the next day. So I saw a few comments of people who were looking for us at the air show on Sunday. I thought I'd made it clear that we weren't going to be there on Sunday, but I apologize in any case that you guys missed us. We will be back at the Oceana Air Show next year. We had a fantastic time and shot about half a dozen episodes. 2 of them are posted, the one with the Rhino Demo pilot, and the other one is the one with the CEO of NAS Oceana, who transitioned from Tomcats to Super Hornets, so Rio to Wizzo. So if you haven't seen those, check it out. We have others coming out. I sat down with one of the Tomcat maintainers from my first tour, a great guy named Corey Mayer. He was a structures mechanic, and we caught up about those days, you know, so many years later. What is it, 35 years later? And I also got to sit down with the commander of the Naval Air Force's Atlantic, Admiral Verissimo, great guy. And so those are coming. And we talked to some COs about the H-60 community as well. So look for these episodes to follow. But again, I apologize that we missed some folks on Sunday. Now, as we were traveling back on Sunday, and we went Eastern Shore route, pro tip, do not go Eastern Shore route between Virginia Beach and Annapolis during the summer on a Sunday. So it took us a long time because there was an accident on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And so in any case, we had a lot of time to listen to the radio. And we heard that there was an F-35 that the pilot had ejected out of safely, but the airplane itself was missing. And so that was a very confusing and curious circumstance. So let's go through the TikTok, if you will, and talk about what was known at any given time. And I will also mention that I have a series of questions that I've posed to the Public Affairs Office at Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort. And I actually have my phone up here, and I'm awaiting their reply. So at, let's call it press time, those questions have not been answered. But if they do come up, I'll address them, and I'll actually tell you guys what my questions were as we go along here. But let's just talk about how this all went down. So all of our awareness started with this tweet from the Joint Base Charleston. We're working with Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, South Carolina, to locate an F-35 that was involved in a mishap this afternoon. The pilot ejected safely. If you have any information that may help our recovery teams locate the F-35, please call the Base Defense Operations Center at that number. So this was edited late afternoon on Sunday, has 8.3 million views, but this launched 1,000 memes. So here's F-35 on eBay for $80,000. Here's an app, Find My F-35. Of course, there's the milk carton thing, inaccurately labeled as an Air Force asset. This is a Marine Corps airplane. And this one's my favorite as a dog owner. So when asked by reporters, what are we going to do about this? The acting Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Eric Smith, said, we're going to do a 2-day safety stand down. So it's sort of like the answer was oranges to the question apples. And this safety stand down is precipitated by 3 now Class A mishaps in about a month, maybe a little more than a month. So the first one was an F-18D, actually a Beaufort-based F-18D that was on approach to Marine Corps Air Station Miramar out in San Diego that wound up killing the pilot, whose name is Major Andrew Metler. He's a fairly senior pilot. And the second mishap was a V-22 that involved, well, in Australia, V-22 crashed in Australia that killed Corporal Spencer Collart, 21 years old, from Arlington. He was the crew chief. Also, Captain Eleanor LeBeau, 29-year-old from Belleville. And actually the Squadron XO was Major Tobin Lewis, 37 years old, from Jefferson, Colorado. So 3 Class A's in a row, time for, not in a row, but in rapid succession, time for a safety stand down. So this airplane was missing for 28 hours, which frustrated officials, lawmakers. In fact, let me play you some sound of Nancy Mace on Fox News, and she's, representative from this area. Her reaction to the fact the airplane was missing.
Embarrassing for the Pentagon. I had a briefing yesterday with the Marine Corps from the Pentagon, and they sent people over that could not answer a single question that I had. They couldn't tell me at the time whether the jet was in the air or under the water. Come to find out, the transponder failed. They have not explained why it failed. That is the $80 million question today. The Marine Corps yesterday, I asked if they knew how long the jet could last in the air on autopilot with the amount of fuel it had. They had no answers. The public didn't know if there was a public safety concern, and the public deserves greater transparency. And I'm not talking about spilling national secrets on a classified aircraft. We're just talking about normal public safety, public emergency types of questions that the Pentagon just refused to answer. And so, we have more questions than answers at this point, but I'm going to be demanding answers for South Carolina, for our local leaders, to get to the bottom of it.
So I think Representative Mace's questions there and her frustrations are fair and real. We have, from Admiral Kirby on down, a lot of public affairs officials who are paid pretty decent salaries to give the public confidence and the sense that they're safe and secure. And to allow this thing to be lost, to be missing, this F-35 to be missing for 28 hours was unsat. So that's one issue associated with this. I'm making sure my phone keeps going to pause here, so I'm making sure it's live, so I can see if the PAO at Beaufort answers the questions. So let's go through some of the basics associated with the F-35. Well, before we do that, let's look at, it was found 28 hours later, so that makes it on Monday later in the afternoon. It was found about 85 miles north of Joint Base Charleston. Now, some media sources have improperly identified Joint Base Charleston as the field from which the airplanes launched. It is not. Their home base is Marine Corps Air Station, Beaufort. I've landed there one time. In fact, my final flight in the F-14 in the spring of 1998 was what we call an out and in to Marine Corps Station, Beaufort, to visit our Marine Corps Hornet Squadron there when I was CAG Ops. So this is where the crash, the path the airplane took, more or less. As it crashed, it went through a tree line and wound up in an open field. The squadron is VMAT-501, which has the nickname the Warlords. So 501 started as the F-35 RAG in Eglin in 2010, and then moved to Beaufort some years later. We should note that the F-35B variant of the F-35, remember there are three types. There's the A, which is the Air Force model, B, which is the Marine Corps model, and the C, which is the carrier base model. The first one to get to the fleet was the B, and the F-35, the Marines needed it because it was replacing the aging AV-8 Harrier. So it's the vertical takeoff and landing variant of the airplane, used aboard amphibious assault ships in the Navy, U.S. Navy, and also it did a sort of test deployment aboard the Queen Elizabeth with the Royal Navy, very successful by all accounts. It's a cool airplane. I have flown the simulator down at Pax River at VX-23. It's intuitive. I'll say it's easy to fly, and all around a pretty great airplane. So what do we think happened here? And again, I'm awaiting the answers to the following questions. And so let me just grab my phone here, and I'll read the questions that I asked. So my first question to the public affairs office at Beaufort, who I actually had a phone call with, and it was a pleasant phone call. They seem to be receptive. They're also getting hammered by queries, and the staff sergeant there mentioned that she had just come out of a staff meeting with the base CO, and they were coming up with these RTQs, response to queries. And this was early this morning that I ask these questions. So my questions are, what was the nature of the sortie when the mishap occurred? Was it across country? Was it an FRS syllabus event? So again, VMFA-501 is the F-35 training squadron for the Marine Corps. So you have students and instructors. We know the time of day, basically, that the mishap occurred, afternoon on Sunday. I asked what pilots were involved, and I put a caveat: if you can't give the names, please provide the billets. So was this an instructor and a student, or two instructors, or even two students? Was it the flight lead or the wingman who ejected? What was the basic nature of the aircraft emergency that caused the pilot to eject? So I've heard on the rumor mill a bunch of things: total electrical failure, hydraulic failure, And we'll talk about another anomaly to the F-35 that has been rumored to have been a cause. And this borders on conspiracy, but we'll discuss it anyway. Was the transponder on and working? You heard Congresswoman Mace talking about the Marines couldn't give her the answer to that question when she asked. What did the Wingman do after the mishap pilot ejected? So again, there are rumors that he immediately RTB'd to Beaufort, or maybe he did the right thing, which is become the on-scene commander, where the pilot went down, ensuring that he landed safely. And there are other questions about why didn't he follow the airplane until it hit, which I think is a little bit unrealistic, because given the choice, and it's kind of binary once the pilot ejects, you're either going to orbit overhead the pilot going down. Remember, it's still daylight, so you're going to orbit overhead the pilot going down as that airplane continues, or follow the airplane. So he most likely, if he didn't immediately RTB, just stayed overhead and did, let's call it the RESCAP, the Rescue Combat Air Patrol mission, on-scene commander. And then my final question to the PAOs there at Marine Corps Station Beaufort is, why did it take 28 hours to find the wreckage? And then I told her I have a hard deadline of the start of this live stream. And so again, I'm awaiting their response. I'll keep my eye on the phone as we discuss. So I'll address questions after I sort of give the setup here, and then we'll discuss the chat. Remember, it's just me, so one-arm paper hanger when I do these things. Okay, so we've discussed what the F-35 can do. Now let's talk about an anomaly that actually the Daily Mail actually brought up in an article. Now, there's a system called Autonomic Logistics Information System, Autonomic Logistics Information System, ALIS. And I won't read you the slide, but basically this allows the airplane to get data transfer in real time, and also on the maintenance side to have the maintainers like preload and pre-position the right black boxes or whatever is needed to fix a gripe, let's call it, before the airplane lands, right? So it's pretty cool, because back in the old days, we'd trap and we'd look over, as we landed, the rear would go up and up, meaning front seat's good, back seat's good, or up and down, and try to give sort of an indication. Or as we got sidelined, you'd have written it on a kneeboard card and give them as much as they can to sort of quickly fix the problem, because those airplanes are going to go flying again, in a few minutes on the flight deck. So our maintainers were kind of like a pit crew. So if those guys could have known through a digital sort of exchange what the problem was, and then be pre-positioned with the right black box. So as soon as we park, shut the airplane down, they can slam the new one in there. That would have been really cool. However, what the GAO has reported 4 years ago, it warned about what they're calling a backdoor for hackers. And let me read what the Daily Mail writes here. It says, a report by a government watchdog warned that the F-35's weapon systems could be overtaken by a relatively simple tool and technique. And they mentioned that Lockheed Martin was tight-lipped on Monday about the crash, but said in a statement, "We are aware of the mishap involving an F-35B from Marine Corps Station Beaufort. Thankful the pilot ejected safely. We are supporting the government's investigation." So it doesn't say a whole lot about ALIS. POGO, which is the Project on Government Oversight, I think is what that acronym stands for. They released a report in 2019 that showed that nearly every software-enabled weapons system tested between 2012 and 2017 can be hacked, including the F-35. So this is probably the subject for a completely different live stream or episode. The agency wrote, and this is as reported by the Daily Mail, Despite years of patches and upgrades, the F-35's most combat-crucial computer systems continue to malfunction, including Autonomic Logistics Information System Maintenance and Parts Ordering Network. The data links that display combine exchange, target, and threat information among fighters and intelligence sources. As in previous years, cybersecurity testing shows that many previously confirmed F-35 vulnerabilities have not been fixed, meaning that enemy hackers could potentially shut down the ALIS network, steal secret data from the network and onboard computers. This is where the conspiracy lives, and perhaps prevent the F-35 from flying or from accomplishing its missions. So the question is, was the airplane hacked and flying in a way that the pilot wasn't in control of it? I do not believe this is the case, but I'm addressing that conspiracy absent answers from the Marine Corps at this time. So comment on that as you will. The other bit of information that is coming out, and none of this is verified by the Marine Corps yet, is the pilot ejected and the airplane was on autopilot as he ejected. And again, we don't know the nature of the aircraft malfunction that caused him to eject. The other thing that comes up when you're talking F-35, and we've talked about this with John Nickel during our ejection episode a few weeks ago, and also when that F-35 crashed at Fort Worth when it was doing its final acceptance testing, that very viral phone video taken from the adjacent highway, a lot of folks were saying, well, the F-35 will auto-eject the pilot, and this is only a function or a feature of the F-35B because the engineers sort of found out that in some regimes, the pilot would not have enough time to eject, so the airplane makes the decision, down low, nose pitches down, boom, you punch out. So that's another thing that people are sort of bantying about is, did the pilot get auto-ejected? And so I'm going to suggest, without any other explanation, that that's not what happened here, because the airplane went a considerable distance after the pilot ejected. So I think the autopilot situation is a possibility. And then some people are saying, well, but autopilot would malfunction once the pilot ejected. That's not necessarily true. Okay, so that's kind of all we know at this point. So let me dive into the questions here, or into the comments. And again, thanks, big crowd. Thanks for showing up. So Richard says, early reports indicate there were 2 aircraft returning from an undisclosed training mission were on final approach to Charleston. The mishap aircraft was the lead. Okay, so were they diverting? So again, the question is, what sort of hop was this, sortie? Was this a cross country? It's Sunday, so generally, unless we're behind on X's at the RAG, we're not going to fly on Sunday necessarily, unless maybe we're prepping to go to the boat for amphib quals, carrier quals. Maybe, we have a RAG class that's behind. You can fly on Sunday, but generally you don't. So the other thing about a 2-plane cross country, that's usually you go on a cross country as a single ship. So I don't know about that. I can say there were no F-35s at the Oceana Air Show. So they weren't at Oceana. I can verify that. But whatever, that's an interesting point that Richard brings up here. You'd think the software programs would be locked down tight. Yes, you would think. But as Pogo flagged here, apparently they're not. And again, I'm not saying that the airplane was hacked and that's why the pilot ejected, but apparently the F-35, as well as other airplanes with ALIS, are subject to a whole bunch of hacking. And that's either in flight, and also that data transmission system on the maintenance side is vulnerable to hacking. Mishap seems like an understatement. Well, that's just a technical term for an an accident, right? We call it a mishap because accident sort of connotes an act of God or something that was out of anybody's control. And the Naval Safety Center and other military safety organizations, as you do a chain of events, you don't allow that something was not preventable in a mishap chain of events. So it wasn't hacked. That would be very difficult to do. Okay. I'll admit I don't know a whole lot about those things, but I think it's possible, if not difficult, possible. Dean says he went down in a neighborhood. Why didn't the wingman follow the damaged F-35 or at least radio heading in direction? He should have followed to see if it was endangering civilians. So as we said, Dean, you either maintain on-scene commander by orbiting overhead the guy who's ejecting and parachuting to Earth, or you follow the airplane that's transiting, in this case, looked to be a northerly path. You can't do both. And so the question you ask is, why didn't the wingman follow the damaged F-35? The second half of your question is valid. Radio heading and direction. So again, it took 28 hours to find the airplane over the continental United States. And yes, this area of South Carolina, has, some swamps and there's some, rural areas, but, it shouldn't have taken that long. The other thing you're hearing is, well, the airplane's stealth. Okay, here's a pro tip. Once the airplane hits the ground, it's not stealth anymore. Everything inside the airplane is very highly visible. So again, if you're talking about radar while it's in flight, and this is the question that Representative Mace didn't have answered, was the transponder on and working? So if you're doing an airways navigation cross country, your transponder is on. And I would suggest anytime you're flying in the ATC structure, with airliners and civil airplanes and so forth and so on, you're going to have your transponder on. You'll be squawking, as we call it. And so this is a question that we have. And then if that is the case, the transponder was not working, then why were they flying around in airspace? Because now you're basically a mid-air risk if ATC cannot see you. It's hard for them to give you see and avoid, and hard for them to give airliners see and avoid calls, so forth and so on. So that's a big question that needs to be answered. Gary asked, does the F-35 have full autonomous capabilities? Can it remain on mission or return to base if pilot is incapacitated? It certainly has the ability to drive to waypoints, to drive along a mission profile. I don't think it has the ability to, it's got, PLM and the other landing modes that we've talked about associated with the ramp strike on Vinson. We've gone in great detail about how the F-35C particularly is easier than legacy airplanes to land at the ship because of the auto landing modes. But I don't think it could go from the point the guy ejected and then return. Let me just say it couldn't do that. Good question, though. Porto asked, I'm not American. I'm coming from a NATO country which is going to buy the F-35. I strongly believe that it was flying in full stealth mode, and this is why it was difficult to find. Okay, we'll see. I don't believe it was in full stealth mode. I think it was on a mission where the transponder should have been working. If it wasn't working, they should have been singing out, pilot altitude, airspeeds, locations, headings, all of those sorts of things. But we'll see. You might be right. And that would be an interesting wrinkle. Yes, Michael. Mishap is nav speak or military aviation speak for a mishap or an accident. Lockheed Martin has partnered with 4 companies across the Gulf Cooperation Council for improved regional sustainment support. Yes, this is why the airplane has kind of succeeded against being over budget and behind schedule, because it's an international coalition, too big to fail, as we say. The rear seat was the hacker. So this is a single seat airplane, and there are no two-seat versions of the F-35. So this, again, is my question to the public affairs folks at Beaufort, which is, okay, was this student instructor, lead wingman, vice versa? Again, somebody was just saying that they knew that it was the lead that ejected. I don't know for sure. The transponder was in-op, confirmed. Based on what Representative Mace said on Fox News, apparently the Marine Corps told her that the transponder was not working. And what that means exactly, I don't know. So Ben says, 40-second time. Why didn't the wingman follow? Because he or she was trained to do the right thing. I don't agree with you. You know, the wingman, what do you mean by follow? Follow the airplane to impact? Then I agree with you. But follow the pilot until he landed on the ground, then that's what you're trained to do. Again, we can get other airplanes. There's nothing you can do about the airplane, as we talked about with that Thunder over Michigan MiG ejection thing. It's like, okay, we were lucky in this case. Pilot lived. Nobody on the ground was hurt, just like we were in Michigan. And so at that point, your concern as the wingman is the well-being of the guy who ejected, right, or girl. We don't know the identity of the pilot. Horn 7 says, we have to surmise the pilot was not in control of the craft. I would assume that's true. I don't think you're going to eject from a perfectly working F-35 just because. So again, what is it? Hydraulic failure, total electrical failure, spurious inputs. We'll find out. The plane knows before the pilot would in that case. I think you're talking about the auto eject sort of thing. Tom asks, short in the system? Unknown. We don't know. Perhaps that was it. Again, the Marines have not come forward yet. In fact, maybe I'll come up again once I have answers to my questions. I'll probably get them by close of business today. So maybe I'll do a quickie, just regular episode, not a live stream. Stingray 427 man says, I'm pretty sure the contacts between Starlink and the U.S. military are backup based. Okay. So this would have to do with spurious sort of connectivity issues. We have no knowledge or any evidence that was the nature of the mishap. So Richard's making a joke. Pilot made disparaging comment about the plane's AI, and the AI could take and booted the pilot. Matt says, the only in STOVL mode will it do that 20-degree pitch, 20-degree roll, auto eject, as I said. Roger that, and it was not hacked. I doubt it as well, just bringing that up for discussion's sake and because Daily Mail talked about it. If memory, Martin says, if memory serves me, as a graduate of the aviation safety course and as a DOSS, both in tactical and training squadrons, the information release was minimal until investigations were complete. Okay, roger that, Martin. Concur. However, we went 28 hours with no information. So we didn't know any details, unclassed details about the nature of the mishap. So all this did was induce confusion, concern in the region, and a bunch of wise-ass memes on X and elsewhere on social media. So, you know, I did do public affairs for the V-22 program. That was my first job out of the Navy. I'm not a trained PAO. I just did one, you know, because I needed a day job when I was under contract to write for Penguin Putnam. That's when Punk's Wing and Punk's Fight were written. But I had a great time. That was an intense team. We got that airplane fielded. But I would many times field queries when we had either a nacelle fire or something. We didn't crash any V-22s in those days, but there were some engineering situations that demanded a prompt response. So this is what PAOs call go ugly early. So it's not that the information wasn't known. I just think because they didn't know where the crash wreckage was, they were hesitant to talk about any of the other details, which I believe was a mistake. So yes, minimal, but Martin, I'm saying they didn't even reach the minimal bar. And I said as much on NPR. Maybe some of you guys heard that little cameo I had on NPR. Live from the waiting room at Walter Reed, by the way. Let's see what else we got here. Cupcake says auto ARS cap when it notices the pilot punched out, but still more or less intact would be cool. I mean, kind of like a jet ski, you know, when you fall off a jet ski and it goes into that, you know, dead man circle, right? There's something to that, you know, guy punches out, airplane goes in a, you know, 30-degree angle of bank, 250 knots, just kind of waits there until it flames out, I guess. Again, we're lucky that it hit an unpopulated, or if it was populated, it didn't hit any houses. Astronetics says, what I've gathered is that it was a cross-country or part of an LSE, interrogative LSE. I'm not sure what that acronym is, but that's kind of what is being surmised around professional circles, is because it was on a Sunday, it was a cross-country. So Mike L says, I can only speak for the F-16, but jets generally auto trim to 1G, so it's not unheard of that it kept flying. Yeah, right, absolutely. I believe that's the case. The airplane auto ejects to 1G and continue to fly for, you know, a considerable distance. We don't know airspeed, altitude, heading. It looks like it was generally northward when the pilot ejected. And we don't know fuel state. This will all come out when we get more information. Okay, so here's more detail from Richard. Both aircraft went missed approach. Did ACT give a vector for approach? Did the ELT become active at ejection? So that's another great question. You know, I get it. Maybe the transponder is failing, but when you punch out, now you get that really irritating noise on guard. You know, I've heard it. It's a scary sound when you're dark night in the Med off the boat and you suddenly hear that and you realize that means somebody's most likely ejected. So that's a great question, Richard. It should have helped track aircraft path. Certainly the posit when the pilot ejected. Did the wingman note all of those things? And if he did, why didn't we have a dumbed down version of that for the initial public statement to sort of give some sense that it's not totally lost. We're just doing a little DR, dead reckoning, to figure out exactly where it landed. Again, I just think going Nordo for 28 hours was a bad call. Radar Columbia and Myrtle Beach helped find wreckage. I don't know. You saw the all call. Again, let's look at that initial meme or tweet. You know, we're working with, this is from Joint Base Charleston, working with Beaufort to locate the airplane. Pilot ejected safely. Good to know. If you know anything, call this flight number, this number. All right. So thanks for the super chat. Deform 581 asks, would they have the capability to get flight data from the network if they cannot get it from the plane? Yeah, I think so, right? This is what that system is all about. That ALIS is sort of like, real time. It's like telemetry data. So I would have to believe that a 5th-gen airplane, they would know that exactly where the airplane went down. But maybe I'm wrong. Obviously I'm wrong. I don't think they'd let it sit there for 28 hours. The other thing to consider, since we started putting composites in tactical aircraft or any jets, back in the old days, a crash site was not necessarily hazmat. Now, boron fibers, when they burn, you have these little microscopic fibers. If you breathe it, it'll go into your lungs. And once it gets in your lungs, it will never come out. Things like hydrazine and all the other exotic materials that make up a 5th-gen jet, when it turns into a million pieces, that's dangerous to, somebody who's trolling a wreckage site. So, bad stuff. Horn says, bring back the F-14. Amen. Michael mentions no F-35s at Oceana and almost no static displays either. No, there were no F-35s. F-22, that did an amazing demo. That's the first time I've seen the F-22 demo in real life. It'll change your life. All props to the F-22. Very cool. And the other thing that happened, and this is a little bit of a segue here, or an aside. So I'm walking into the O Club on Friday night for what they called the CO's reception. And this F-22 comes by the O Club relatively low and full afterburner. It was so cool. So let's just say inter-service rivalry is not dead. It did my heart good. G. Growls says, I understand if the transponder was off, but doesn't the aircraft have some sort of ELT? Yes, that's what we were saying about at ejection, certainly. The airplane, the ELT would have gone off. And again, that's an obnoxious chirping on guard frequency 2430 on UHF. David James, good afternoon, Mooch. Good afternoon, David. It just mystified me they would lose, quote unquote, an F-35 and ask the public for assistance. Still wonder what made the pilot eject. Glad he's okay. That's what we're wondering. And we all share that sense that he's okay. All right, let's do a few more questions here. The recalcitrant one said, over a potentially populated area, is it not practice to have the wingman destroy the craft to prevent massive casualties? I don't believe so. And these airplanes, if it's a Sunday cross country, they're not loaded with any ordnance, so they wouldn't have the ability to destroy the craft. Again, our assumption is that the wingman did on-scene commander stuff, orbited overhead as his flight lead is descending to Earth. We don't know the exact weather conditions, right? So somebody mentioned that they did missed approach at home base, and maybe they were going to the divert field. I don't think he flamed out, because it wouldn't have gone that far if the airplane flamed out. The other question is, obviously, when it did finally crash, it had no fuel in it, because there's not a whole lot of char damage at the crash site. There's some, but not a whole bunch, as if the airplane was, had a half bag of gas when it hit. So this is just like with the Payne Stewart, mishap and other airplanes where they get hypoxic and the airplane's on autopilot and it flies across the country until it runs out of gas. Like that one that happened to, the sonic boom, a situation where those National Guard airplanes were chasing down that, I think it was a Cessna Citation, if I'm remembering correctly, that it was headed to Stanton, Virginia, on autopilot, and finally it flames out and winds up crashing at that point. So these are the things we don't know. Looking at my phone, still no answers from Marine Corps Public Affairs. Mike L., this question has been tormenting me, and I'm sorry to go off subject here, but when the French Rafales cross deck on a carrier, who waves them? They have LSOs. Yeah, let's not go off topic here. Let's do one more question. TSU Funk 2005. The jet actually did what it was designed. Be stealthy, LOL. So the jet is so stealthy that the U.S. government couldn't find the jet in 28 hours. So, okay. Yes, the U.S. government, but mostly what we're talking about here is, 2nd Marine Air Wing, and MAG-31 and VMAT-501, the F-35B training squadron, Marine Corps Station Beaufort. So that's kind of the cognizant authorities here. Certainly ATC, FAA, NTSB all had means to assist, and I'm sure they were all energized in short order. Perhaps also the comms lead was given to Headquarters Marine Corps because those other agencies that I just rattled off are not comfortable talking about a airplane that has a lot of top secret components, et cetera, right? So, all right. So that's kind of what we know. And a lot of folks have been pinging me to give, my thoughts or my coverage of it. Not quite deep intel at this point. When I get the questions answered, I'll come back up in a regular episode, a recorded episode, and give you those answers. And if anything else comes up in the meantime, I'll certainly let you guys know. As always, thanks for your support. Thanks for the gigantic crowd that showed up for this live stream. Very much appreciated. Thanks for the best wishes to Carrie for her broken wrist. She's on the mend. Let me just tell you, there's a lot of bones in the wrist and ankle if you were not aware of that. And, a minor fall can result in some pretty major damage. So that's something we now understand fully. So this is one of the beauties of being a full-time YouTuber is I can attend to her as I'm talking to you guys and working on other stuff for the channel. Once again, thanks to everybody who came to say hi at our setup at NAS Oceana. Thanks to my good friend, Hoser Miller, for being my wingman. He jumped on the case when Carrie couldn't do it, and he was top-notch, just really right there. All those episodes that you'll see were filmed by him, and there were a lot of well-wishers who were happy to see Hoser as well. So that worked out for sure. And as I said, we'll be back there again next year. So if you missed us, just chill for 363 days, and we'll see you next year there. And we'll probably do more air shows. I mean, that was really, really fun. And again, I think it's a very unique opportunity for folks to come out and say hi. It was kind of borderline overwhelming to see folks drive from long distances to come just say hello. We had stickers and koozies, and were able to sign some books and did a couple of raffles. So that was really, really fun. All right. So again, thanks to everybody for showing up. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Look for more episodes from Oceana. Also, I have a couple from Tailhook that I still haven't put out yet. One is about Air Force tankers, and another one is about, what was the other one about? I'm blanking what the other one was about. Oh, it's about next-gen helmet visors, very cool technology. And then, as I said, there's about 4 more from Oceana that are coming out as well. So a lot of content coming out. So if you're not already a subscriber, become one so you do not miss anything. As you can see, there's a lot happening. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.